I thought I would make a video today to talk about some issues that I have been going through following the death of my 18-year-old son, who was killed in a tragic accident January 26, 2019. He was 18 years old. His name was Logan Deerdorf, and his girlfriend was also killed in the accident along with him. I'm really going to talk about things today, not really about the accident, but things that I have had issues trying to find any resources to help me along with the process. And I wanted to tell the ugly about some of the things that you never hear. I've never heard of anybody going through some of the things that I've had to deal with in this process. So I know I can't be the only one, so I just wanted to get my story out there and maybe help someone else go through the process. But also, if anybody has answers to some of the questions that I have, I would love some information back. So I'm going to start by telling them I have to tell a little bit of the backstory to get to where I'm going with it. I was a single mother raising 3 children. My son has a different father than my girls. We divorced whenever my son was young. I had sole custody of my son all his life. He never had any other custody given to anyone else. I had sole custody, period. Now, with that being said, my son did not have a relationship really with his father for about 6 to 7 years due to my ex-husband had gotten into some trouble and was incarcerated for some time. So therefore my son was unable to really have much of a relationship with his father till he was almost 13 years old. Nothing against his father, he just got into some trouble, some things that people deal with, normal things that you see happen. He's a great person, never had anything bad to say about him. Ultimately though, we did get the divorce. I had custody. My son lived with me in Duncan, Oklahoma until he was almost 16 years old. With that being said, I had remarried, was in a bad relationship that was very, very physical. My ex-husband was very abusive. And at one point I had chose to move my 15-year-old son to his father's. He moved right before he turned 16 to his dad's house due to the fact that I wanted him safe and away from the marriage that I was in and trying to get out of. I was afraid that my ex-husband was going to do something to my son, so I wanted to protect my son, so I got him out of this situation. So for the last year and a half of his life, he lived with his father in Tecumseh, Oklahoma. Now, again, my son only had a relationship with his father that was very consistent from the ages of 13 to 18. My son turned 18 in December of 2018. And again, he had the car accident that took his life a month and a half or so from his 18th birthday. So he had just turned 18. With that being said, my ex-husband had just started a new job, had life insurance on Logan. He had taken out some life insurance, I believe, back in November or so of 2018. So just 2 or 3 months prior to the accident, a life insurance claim had been taken out. So after the death of my son, obviously him and his new wife had went to the funeral home and was trying to get all of that started. I was by no means in any shape or form able to make any decisions just immediately. I was just in a daze, a shock. My son was my world. He was my best friend. We were so close. He was a mama's boy. It just took me by surprise. I just could not function. When I got to the funeral home, the day that we were going to make the funeral arrangements, my ex-husband had let me know, hey, we're going to make the funeral arrangements at 10 o'clock in the morning. Meet us there at the funeral home. We'll make the arrangements together. When I got there to the funeral home, they had already been there, and you could see that they had already made most of the funeral arrangements prior to me showing up at 10 o'clock. They already had my son's clothes picked out and brought up there that he was going to wear without asking me. There was no consideration of asking me, what do you think, what do you think about him wearing this, being buried in this? There was no consideration on their part. It was just them strictly taking control, without any consideration to what I wanted out of respect for my son, anything like that. There was no consideration, period. Whenever I got there, the funeral director started going through the process of what they had already done. That's how I had already known they had already pretty much made these arrangements. And just covering the things that they had covered before I got there, which was really shocking because I got there a few minutes before 10 o'clock and I was told that the appointment started at 10. So I felt like I was a day late, dollar short on making any of the arrangements. The only thing that I was able to input into the funeral was I was able to help pick out the casket, which was pretty much as well, I think, picked out. But it was great. It was a great casket. I loved it. But that was the only process that I felt like I was able to be involved with. They already had the obituary wrote up, everything. So the funeral director had given me the obituary, and in the obituary it said that Logan had been raised in Tecumseh, Oklahoma, and I didn't agree with that. And I asked for that to be changed because I felt like it took away from his friends and family in Duncan that he was ultimately raised with. He spent kindergarten to his sophomore year with children in Duncan, not Tecumseh. So I felt like it was taking away from his friends there that he had formed obviously a lot longer of a relationship. So I asked for that to be changed, and as I did that, it obviously struck a chord with my ex-husband, and he jumped up and threatened to kill me and came at me. He said he was going to kill me. And it took about 6 people to pull my ex-husband off of me from hurting me in the funeral planning room. Ultimately, I was the person that was kicked out at that point from making any further arrangements with my son's funeral. Also, on the obituary, they had, because of that event taking place, they decided that it would be best that we have separate visitation hours. But in the paper, they made it seem as if visitation hours was from 1 to 6, and wasn't clear that Logan's father's side would be there from this time to this time, and that I would be there from 4 to 6. So ultimately, everybody showed up at 1 o'clock to pay their respects, and whenever it came time for me and my family to have visitation and visit with his friends, everyone was already gone. They thought it was over. They thought that it closed at 4, and that was the way that the paper made it read. There was no clarification, which that was probably the second thing that was very hurtful to me in planning my son's funeral. It was devastating. It was a slap in the face, and I couldn't understand why all of these things were taking place. I wasn't really thinking that the death of somebody could bring out an ugly side. I never thought that a funeral home would take someone else's side when they physically attacked me. The funeral home director was not very nice to us. They didn't try to accommodate us or help us with easing this process. This was a very hard process, and one that we needed help and direction with that we didn't get. So that's something that going into this, people don't ever talk about. You never hear anybody talk about how the funeral process itself was just horrible. How the funeral director and the funeral home period just didn't make you feel very welcome. I was very isolated in that. So that was the first little bit of weird things that I had to go through and overcome, while also having to bury my only son, which was obviously very difficult. The next thing was being completely isolated and alienated from my son's father's side of the family, that I had had a very good relationship prior to the death of my son. I was deleted off of Facebook. I was deleted by some of my son's friends that he had met and formed great relationships with in Tecumseh. I was alienated. I was the bad mom. I was made to look like a mother that completely abandoned her child, which was not the case. I talked to my son every single day. There wasn't a day that went by that I didn't communicate with my son. There wasn't a day that he wasn't on my mind. I was not one of them. I only wanted to protect my child whenever I moved him in there. It was to the point that even whenever they went to school, to enroll him in school at Tecumseh, I had to sign a waiver allowing my ex-husband to do so, because I had sole custody of Logan. And the court papers had never been changed, were never changed, ever. Even the school treated me as if I was no one. That there was no communication with the school about yearbook. There was no communication about graduation. No communication whatsoever with the school. They never reached out to me to tell me that they were doing anything for my son, or that they were going to do, that yearbooks were coming up and here's where you order a yearbook, or let me know anything. I was completely out in the dark and left to have to deal with my ex-husband, which we weren't getting along at the time. So I was finding out zero. So I even reached out to my ex-husband and had even apologized for what I didn't even know I had done or didn't do, just to have open communication again, because there were so many things going on that we were having to deal with publicly, privately, that we needed to be able to get along with. There was court hearings going to be starting. There was just so many things that we really needed to be able to communicate and get along. And so I reached out in hopes to do so. And it took a little bit to get even that to work to some effect. 5 days before graduation, I even reached out to my ex-husband and asked, hey, are they going to do anything for graduation for Logan? If not, I just don't know if I'm going to go. It's just too hard. And he said, no, they're not doing anything. Don't go. Day after, I find pictures on the internet and a write-up in the Shawnee newspaper about the graduation and how they paid tribute to my son. And I see a picture of my ex-husband holding his cap with his name on it, and then I see a picture of his gown draped on his chair with his name on it and everything, and the things that they did in remembrance at the graduation. So if they weren't going to do anything, why did he go? Why was he there? All of these things that I was just so confused by, I didn't understand, and very hurt. Those are things I don't get a do-over for. I can't redo that. I'm never going to have that opportunity. I'm never going to have the opportunity to rebury my son and go through that process. I had so many things taken away from me for no reason, just out of hurt or anger at the situation that he was just gone. Should never have been pointed towards me. So these are things that we don't ever talk about when you're grieving the loss of a child. You never hear it. You might hear people are arguing over money and wills or personal items, which we argued over personal items, or I really didn't get what I had hoped for. They kept all of the things that they wanted that meant anything to him and gave me a few shirts, and that was it. Things that I bought him, that was all. the things that actually meant anything to him stayed with them. And tough luck. You know, I had him for a year and a half. You had him for most of his life, and that this is all I think you deserve, is how I felt. Now looking back, I know a lot of that was probably the hurt and the anger and the grief that they're dealing with, and I can't judge them for it. All I can say is it's very hurtful. The things that you do during this grieving process is so hurtful, and things that will stay with you forever and will change you completely. So it has been very difficult. I've been trying to find resources to help with me to deal with these issues, on top of grieving my 18-year-old son's death, but to deal with the events that I have no control over, that I can never get back, the do-overs. They're just not there. I have not found any resources that speak really about funeral homes making you not feel welcome, making you feel like you're a horrible person when you've done nothing wrong. You've lost your son. There has been nothing I have found on the internet, YouTube, to go over the ugly of death. You know, they talk about coping with losing a child and the different things, you know, that comes with, you know, but they don't talk about the reality, what really happens. The things that has happened to me, I can't find any help with. I'm just having to deal with them as I go on my own. So that's something that I wanted to address, and it's hard to deal, period, with being hated for some reason that you have no known reason to why, especially when you had the relationship that my ex-husband's family and I had prior to the death. It was just very shocking. And then he's remarried to have his new wife call my son her son. She refers to him as my son. They refer to the loss of Logan as our son. All of the paper write-ups and everything talk about that's her son. I am just the bio mom. He lived there. There was things that she said on social media. She went on the news website and socially said I was just the bio mom and I didn't know what I was talking about, when in fact I knew every detail of the accident. The bio mom. Yes, I was the bio mom. I was his only mother. He did have a stepmother, but I am the only mother, and that's very hurtful. I've even reached out and tried to talk to them about these issues and tell them how hurtful it is that she says these things, and that these are, I understand that she looked at my son as a son, and that's wonderful, but to implicate that she lost a son and that she's grieving the loss of her son like it was her own is, one, it's not right. And she's not grieving the loss of her very own son. She did not give birth to him. She did not raise that child. She had him for a year and a half. I had him the rest of the years of his life. So that's very hurtful, to be told that I'm just a bio mom, when in fact I did everything possible for this child. My ex-husband never paid a dime in child support. I mean, he didn't help financially at all, really, essentially, with Logan, until Logan lived with him. So that's very hurtful. You know, they try to take claim in raising him and making him into the young man that he was, and it's so hurtful because they weren't there to raise him. He was not there through the crucial years of Logan developing his personality and who he was, and the respect and learning the things that he learned through the years. Yes, he was there for a year and a half, lived with them. Yes, he learned things from them for a year and a half, and I cannot take that away. I do believe he did learn from them. Did they raise him and create the person that he was? No, they did not. Do I deserve to be called just the bio mom? No, I do not. Do I deserve to have family completely alienate me from the picture and act as if I was a mother who didn't care for a child? Absolutely not. I never did anything wrong to deserve this. And if my son was alive, he would, oh, if he could just see it, it would devastate him to know that I was being treated this way, especially as close as we were. I would think that they would think about that. They've even made friends hate me and not have anything to do with me for no known reason. The school never one time reached out to me after the death of my son. Not one time did I get a phone call of anything that they were doing. I had to find out through friends of Logan's or through newspaper articles or anything that they had posted that was even taking place. So it's very hurtful that a school community, a school district would allow something like that to take place, and that they even took sides. And they know that Bud did not have custody of Logan because I had to sign a waiver for him to even enroll him. So that alone really hurts, that they knew. They were very much aware that I had sole custody of Logan, and for them not to reach out to me and communicate anything to me that they were going to do is very hurtful as a school community. So not to even say that the whole entire community turned their backs on me because I was not from that town. I lived 2 hours away. Was not there. I didn't know these people, so it was very easy for my ex-husband and his wife to make it look as if I was this absent parent for the last year and a half. But they tried in the obituary to make it seem as if they had raised him all his life, forgetting that he was in jail for 6 years of it, that he wasn't even there. He was incarcerated, not able to have him. You know, they tried to put it off as they were the parents, and very hurtful. And these are things that I think need to really be addressed through psychologists, and how to approach going through these processes if you are handed a bad deal like I was, for no reason. You know, I could see if I was a bad mother who just chose to party and live it up and woohoo, you know, and forget that she had a kid, but that was never the case. My life revolved completely 100% around all three of my children. And my two daughters can still attest to that. My life are my children. That's what matters 100%. Before Logan's death and after Logan's death, that is what matters to me, is family and my children. Nothing else matters. Everything else is just material things or things that I can live without. I cannot live without my family. My children are my life. So to be treated like this is very, very, very hurtful. So if anybody else has ever dealt with this and has any advice, man, I would sure love that on that part of it. I need help. But the next thing I want to address is my process for the last 7 months of just dealing and how to move on, and the things that I'm seeing that are so familiar. You see people say losing a child is like a piece of me died. You hear all these cliches and you think, oh, I know it's got to be devastating and traumatic. Oh, I feel so sorry for these people. Can't imagine what they're going through. No, you can never imagine what we're going through. If you've never lost a child, you cannot imagine. It's not like losing a mother, a father, a dog, a cat, a brother, a sister. It is not the same. I promise you, it is not the same. So another thing that I wanted to address today that might help people who are trying to comfort their friends and family that have went through what I've went through. Let me give you a few things to not say that I know most people don't think about. They don't think that they're trying to help, and they think that saying a few of these things they've heard so many times that that's just what they say, just to make them realize, hey, we're here for you. But let me just tell you, it hurts badly. Please do not ever say this to someone who is dealing with the traumatic loss of a child. One, do not say, at least they're in a better place. That right there might get you throat punched. I know with me, some people said that to me a few times, and I let it slide 1 or 2 times. But I promise you, no mother or father wants to hear that their child is in a better place, because in their mind, they're not in a better place. At that point in time, the initial shock, they're thinking, no, they are in a box in the ground, or they are cremated in a jar. Whatever it may be, however you buried your child, okay. Do not say they're in a better place. Religious people who want to come at moms and dads and help, that's probably the last thing we want. Even though I'm very religious and I have so much faith in God, that was the last thing I wanted to hear as well. Anything about God, because at this point, the initial shock, you were going, if there was a God, why did he take my son? You're questioning your faith, you're questioning God. Please do not bring God into the equation for a while. It takes time. If you are dealing with someone who's young enough to have another child, do not say, at least you can have another child, because I promise you, they could have 10 more children, and those 10 more children would never fill the void that one left them. So saying these things or trying to minimize their hurt or grief is not the smart thing to do. I know you try to help when you say, I understand what you're going through. Please don't say that unless you have really lost a child. If you have lost a child and earned the right to say it, I understand what you're going through, okay, that's fine. But please do not try to minimize their hurt, their grief. Do not try to say, it's been 2 months, move on, you need to get back to life. Again, there is not a time limit on grief. And if you love your child as much as I love my son, I promise you I will never stop grieving the death of my child. I will grieve him until I take my last breath. Do not force me to move on and tell me that I need to be doing this or I need to be that. Unless you have lost a child yourself, do not tell me what I need to be doing. Don't try to give me advice of what I need to be doing. This is my grief, my child. I'll grieve in which I feel I need to grieve. I will move on when I am ready to move on. Now, if you want to help, listen. I need to speak about my child. For me, and it may not be like this for every mother or father, some people choose not to speak of it. Some people choose not to talk about their child. I, on the other hand, choose to talk about my child, because in my mind, if I don't talk about him and I don't remember him and be able to communicate as if he was still alive, then to me that means he didn't exist and he wasn't important enough to talk about. Again, I'm not trying to help anybody with their grief of my child. I'm trying to help myself at this point because I can't help anybody else. So if you can't handle me talking about my child, then the best thing is not to come around, because I'm going to talk about my child. I'm going to grieve in the way I feel is best for me. And for me, I feel like talking about my child helps. It brings me peace. It brings me closer to my child whenever I talk about them. So please do not tell me that I need to get back to life and tell me that I need to start doing this or I need to do this. So those are the things that I really wanted to address, because I know for so many it's so hard to help a friend or a sister or a family member or whatever grieve the loss of a child. It's so difficult. If you haven't lost one, you just don't know what to say. I mean, who would? And we understand that. But if you have nothing to say then that is positive to help, don't say anything at all. Or if you don't know what to say, don't say anything other than I'm here for you. I'm here to listen anytime you need to vent, talk. I'm here for you. That is the best advice you can be given, I believe. For me, I just needed a person to listen to me, whether it be scream, yell, cry, whatever. I just needed to know that people were there and they cared. But to tell me to move on, don't do that, please. I will never move past losing my son. I am forever changed. I am forever grateful that I had the opportunity to have my son for 18 years, because I know that my life would have been really boring without him. And it would not have been filled with as much love as it was filled with. Now the process is to move on without that in my life. And I have to, instead of focusing on the accident, I have chosen to just focus on the 18 amazing years that I had with my son. And how much he taught me in those 18 years. And how much the loss has taught me. It's taught me that death is even uglier than I even knew it to be. And I've been through a lot of death. Lost my mother at a young age. Lost 2 brothers. Lots of aunts, uncles, cousins. But the loss of my son was by far the worst. People ask me, how are you so strong? How do you get up every day and move forward? You're so strong. You've done it with such grace. Well, I had no choice. I wasn't given an option, and I'm not strong. I'm doing what I have to do. I live my life now differently. One, I live it honoring my son, and I get up every day and I make a point to at least bathe, get dressed, and try to regain some kind of normalcy, because that's what my son would expect me to do. I raised my son to be very strong and very independent, and I was a very strong, independent mother. So I raised my child to know that I can do anything I set my mind to, and this is just another step. I can get past this if I set my mind to it. Will I get over it? No. I'll never get over it. But I can get through it. I can live through it. I can take and learn, and I can take and see that there are positives actually from his death. The positives were I was given a son for 18 years. I was given that opportunity for 18 years. Yes, it was taken away from me, but I can't control that. I can't change that. And I had to stop asking why. What did I do? What did my son do? Those are all things that we'll never have the answers to, so there's no point in beating ourselves up. We didn't do anything wrong. He didn't do anything wrong. It was a tragic accident. That's why they call it tragic accident. It was something that, yes, could have been prevented. But again, it just didn't happen that way. It wasn't prevented, unfortunately. And there will be people that pay that price. I'm having to pay the price of not having my son. And with that, I know that my son would want me to learn from it and to help others move through this process as easily and gracefully as possible as well. So that's why I decided to make some videos to answer questions, to give people a different outlook, and to tell people what I've been through, because I had struggled so much with finding any help. I haven't found any help out there to deal with everything I have gone through. Wasn't bad enough that I had lost a child, but the fact that the burial process was horrible. The school was horrible as far as not telling me anything. Things I can't redo. That was horrible. And I'm having to deal with that for the rest of my life. And that's on me. That's not on anybody else. It's on me on figuring out how to do that. And that's just my process, and eventually I'll get through it. I get through every day to the next day for my son, because in my mind, if I give up, if I say I can't go on any longer without my son, my 2 older daughters paid the sacrifice of not having a mother. I've got 2 grandchildren that would lose a Gigi, and I have a son that I believe is in heaven looking down and able to see everything I do. And I feel like he would be so disappointed if I gave up, because that's not me and who I was or who I raised him to be. He would be very disappointed in me. So I live my day every day to be a better person, to help someone, find someone that I can help. If I can help one person every day to better something in their life, or to get through something that I've already been through, that's my purpose. That is why I'm still here. And if I wasn't, who would remember my son? Who would be able to tell the stories about my son? Who's going to continue my son's legacy if I'm not along for the ride? I'm the one to do that. Who better to tell the story than a mother? I would be letting my son down. I would be letting so many people down if I just gave up. And I can't do that. I'm a fighter. Now I have to turn my experience around, because I feel like God would want me to use my experience to help someone else. That's what he did when he gave his only son. So that was the lesson he was trying to teach by doing that. So who am I to not follow those footsteps and the things that I've been taught in church all my life to do? Was my son not as good? I believe that he deserves just as much attention and praise that anyone else does. So I have to continue that. I have to be strong for him and for my girls, and to help my girls along with the process as well, because they're grieving just as badly as I am. It's just a different grief. They're grieving a brother. I'm grieving a son. I've grieved for 2 brothers. I lost 2 brothers at young ages. I was 26 when one died, and I was, I think 31, 32 when the other one died. So I was very young, and it's been years back. It's been 12 years since I lost my last brother. The other one was 23 years ago. So 23 years and 12 years, and now this. And so I know that loss as well. So I feel like I can help my girls in that process as well, maybe by my life experience there. So all I'm saying is, if you have family or friends who are going through what I'm going through, please be very considerate about the way you approach them, and try to consider what it would be like if you had a child and lost them. They were completely removed immediately with no warning. It wasn't like it was a lifelong illness or you had 2 months to prepare. We had no time to prepare. It hit. We couldn't say goodbye. We never got to say goodbye to him. He was gone on scene. So there was no comforting my son through the process. He passed without anyone. And that's very hurtful. So I just hope that I can be some form of inspiration to help mothers who are struggling to get out of bed every day, see that they were so blessed to have their child for just the moment that they had them, whether it be 10 minutes or 10 years or 30 years. It doesn't matter how long or how short. We were blessed. And we need to always remember that and remember the good. Try not to focus on the actual death and the fact that they're not going to be here to hit those milestones that they should be here for. I can't focus on that. I just have to focus on the positive. And another thing that I'm having to do is stay away from the negative people, the things that are negative, people who gripe and complain constantly and have so much stress in their lives. I have to alienate myself from that. I know right now I can't help. I've always been the person that was always there for all of my friends, and right now I just can't be. I have to be there for myself and my girls. My energy level is already depleted. I can't focus on helping others all the time that I was used to helping. And those friends who are like, well, she doesn't have time for me, she's grieving, or she's not calling me back. There's reasons why. I have to isolate myself from some of those situations. It's not that I don't want to be involved, it's that right now my energy level is so depleted that I have to regain my energy to be able to function in this world like I was put on the earth to do. So please give parents the respect and the time. Don't get upset when they don't call you back or text you back immediately, or if it takes them time, or if they never do. Please know that they're dealing with so much, and to have any more negativity spoke of them about you not being able to focus on other people, that hurts. You know, sometimes you have to take the selfishness and say, you know what, they're hurting and I can't be selfish. I need to give them that time. Even though I want to spend time with them or I want to talk to them, you have to give them time. And you can't rush it. The more you try to force it and rush it, the longer it takes, because you put them 2 steps back when you start trying to force and tell them how to grieve. So please don't do that. Please give them plenty of time, because I promise you it's going to take years, not months, years, for them to be able to function as normal as they feel like they can. Some never do get back to it. I just hope that one day I will. I've got a few people in my life who have lost children, and they've kind of helped me along the way on that. And it's been very helpful. And I just want to say thank you for listening. If you're a funeral home, funeral director, or a school, please be more considerate, because those are lasting effects that will affect their life forever. Thank you.